really nice of you to do this. I guess much like Adam, you and I met on a tennis court.
Yes.
This is sort of a pattern here.
I think you and Adam beat me. That's how we met.
Well, you know, I'd be happy to talk about the many matches we've played. Anyone who wants to hear about some of those scores after the dinner tonight, check with me later. Actually, you know, I've had a lot of fun playing with you over the years. But one of my fondest memories was when you had your 40th birthday party at a beach club. There was a great U2 cover band playing, and as Adam says, I can really dance well. So if you guys are lucky later tonight, you might see it at the Wobbly Barn. So you've had a really interesting career. All right? I mean, it's a fascinating career. I've been following it as a friend and reading about it in the media. But you started your career as an accounting manager for E&Y. That must have been a blast.
It was a good start to my career. I'm a very proud Ernst & Young alumni. So yes.
So then you went to Rainbow Holding, and then off to AOL. You went from a financial ops position to CFO, then COO, then vice chairman. Pretty amazing. And Mike Brown, who's here from Bowery Capital, was with you in those days.
Yes.
And then CFO of Time Warner Cable. Huge job. And then after the spin out, sort of an interesting turn into the entrepreneurial world. Not exactly an emerging company, but a sort of a company that services startups. And it was a startup only recently itself. Now you're president and COO of WeWork, which I think many people think is just the coolest real estate company on the planet. So how was the transition from the bureaucracy of financial support and the cable industry to go into the freewheeling entrepreneurial environment of WeWork?
Yep. Well, first, thank you for having me. Teresa, the boys, and I are thrilled to be here. It was a very cold day, but a very fun day on the slopes, so thank you. Before I start, maybe I just get a show of hands of how many people have actually been to a WeWork? Nice. How many members do we have? All right, good. You know, it's interesting how I wound up at WeWork, and I'll give you a little bit of context, but one of the things when I was going through the process with Adam was that I actually had been in entrepreneurial environments and had actually worked closely with some pretty well entrepreneurs throughout my career.
Tim Armstrong.
Tim. You know, really my first dealing with an entrepreneur was when Time Warner bought Turner Broadcasting Systems, and Ted Turner came into the fold. And some of those stories are probably best told at the bar, not live in front of a large audience. But that was, you know, really the first time of sort of meeting and working with someone who had, frankly, birthed their company. I then got to work a bit with Steve Case and team as Time Warner and AOL merged. Again, really, you know, started to really understand the founder mentality. I then left and I worked with the Dolan family for 4 years. Rainbow Media is now called AMC Networks, of Walking Dead fame, and you know, really got to experience working with Mr. Dolan, who had founded Cablevision. He had founded HBO. He had founded regional sports networks, and that was, again, you know, sort of a unique you know, person to spend time with. And then, frankly, the cable industry today, you know, probably gets a bit of a bad rap, but frankly, you know, the cable industry were sort of a lot of the original disruptors. You know, the John Malones of the world, and you know, there was and there continues to be sort of an entrepreneurial spirit in the cable industry. And so, you know, I think when WeWork was trying to figure out what exactly they needed, it was a membership business. It was a business that, frankly, had physical facilities that needed to be managed. It had a hospitality component to it. It had a technology component to it. You know, and they tell the story at sort of one of the board meetings. Someone said, you know, we should go get a cable guy. Someone else said, you know, we need a technology guy. I think they had taken a run at a couple of hotel guys. And I think the fact I had spent some time in technology, I'd spent really the last 15 years of my career in membership businesses, that was something that had, attracted to them. And I get from people in media who sort of know I've been in media really for the lion's share of my career, they're sort of like, how did you wind up in real estate? And, the way I really describe WeWork to them is, I describe it as really the programming layer of real estate. And if you think about, the cable business, which is a physical infrastructure business, and then you have, for example, infrastructure around video infrastructure, and companies like Netflix or companies like HBO will bring that infrastructure to life. You have broadband infrastructure, companies like Facebook and Snap bring that infrastructure to life. The real estate business, if you think about it, has never really had a programming sort of experience layer. You've seen a little bit in the hotel brands, but nothing around sort of working, and nothing really much. There's been some stuff around the edges around living. And so, to have a membership business that in a perverse way was similar to some of the stuff I had done around programming experiences and bringing sort of infrastructure to life, so to speak. In a weird way, I sort of found my way to WeWork, and they found their way to me.
Yeah, I never drew those parallels between real estate and the sort of cable industry, so that's interesting. You've done a lot of amazing things. You've had exposure to some great entrepreneurs. There are a lot of parents out here of teenagers and college-age students. Would you recommend finance as an entry point into sort of broader operations and entrepreneurship? Is that, obviously it worked out for you. Is that something that I tell people don't go to law school all the time, but would you encourage people to get a background in finance for a broader business?
I would agree to not go to law school. It's interesting. I think probably when you and I were coming out of college, I think the decision set around where you went to work and what career path, it was pretty simple, and it's almost, at least for me, like I look back and it was, what were they going to pay me, and did I like the people? That was basically it. Today, I think rightfully so, and even when I was trying to figure out from WeWork, I feel like I very much have taken a lesson from the millennials of sort of, I think their decision set starts with the people, often, the founders, and what do they think of them? What do they think of the mission of the company? What do they think of the values and the culture of the place? What do they think of the product? And very low on the list, often is what do do they know anything about the business plan, or what do they think of the business plan? And really at the bottom will tend to be what are they getting paid? And I think that is one of the reasons it has frankly led to the sharing economy. I think, look, unfortunately, people coming out of college today, I think they have lower employment rates than when you and I were coming out. They have higher student loans. And I think they have said, you know what, there's a lot of sort of headwinds I'm facing. I'm really going to focus on experience. I'm going to focus on values. I'm going to focus on things that are important to me, which has frankly put pressure, I think, on people from accounting firms and investment banks and law firms to how do they recruit from people who the boxes that people used to want to check are no longer the boxes that they want to check. And it's created, I think, huge sort of, I think, social, fiscal, and other issues at universities, at graduate schools, as they start to think about what is really, important to people. But I think, the Airbnbs, the Ubers, the WeWorks of the world have been able to sort of bubble to the surface as an offering, because people can have great experiences at an Airbnb that they can afford even with lower salaries. They can have great office space at WeWork. They can travel around cities without a car. And I think the millennials have basically showed us the way in terms of how, if you're passionate about something and you are economic about it, you can have, it's really the experience generation. So, all that long-winded way of saying, look, I do think there's certain building blocks today that are critical. I think probably in our generation it was a lot of go to finance, go to law. I think today, Teresa and I went to Georgetown, and I spent a lot of time down there, and I've been pushing them on we need a data and analytics program in their business school. We need more international programs for people to get exposure to. So I think finance and law will always be sort of building block skills to have, but I think that things like computer science, data and analytics are also going to be just like you have to have those skills for sort of the people going into college or coming out of college today.
Yeah, I think we're all very hopeful that Cornell Technion will supply some of that technical skill in New York City. We actually had the dean of the school here a few years ago to speak. So why don't you think the large commercial real estate operators have taken advantage of this opportunity or seized this business model?
Yeah, it's interesting. The media business, the cable TV business, one of the magical things about it was we sort of created this ecosystem and frankly created value for both sides. The cable networks made the cable systems more valuable, who in turn drove penetration of their systems, and as a result the cable networks became more valuable, and it was just circular. The amount of times I sat in meetings and at Time Warner Cable, because I had experience, at now AMC Networks and Time Warners of the world, that the cable guys said, why are we paying the HBO guys? Why are we paying the ESPN guys all this money? We can do it ourselves. The fact is we couldn't. The cultural differences between running an infrastructure business and running a programmed experience, sort of lifestyle experience, lifestyle brand, they're just night and day. And the executives you need and the culture issues, there was a reason that Time Warner Inc. and Time Warner Cable, frankly, separated those businesses. It made sense to do that. So I think, look, if we were sitting here a year from now and I said, you know what, we're going to start building ground up office towers because we really know how to do this now, I think you would say you guys are crazy and you've lost your mind. I think similarly, the reason, and look, some of these guys have tried it on the developer side. It's just a different business. And I think what they have come to realize with WeWork is we can create this ecosystem where, frankly, we come into their buildings, we won't take the whole buildings, we'll help drive rents for the rest of the building, we'll drive values in the neighborhood, we'll drive value in that building, and it's creating sort of this ecosystem of value creation, which is good for everyone.
So, any real estate operator could, along those lines, put together a shared kitchen, some cold brew, organic snacks. What makes WeWork different from traditional office space and also from your competitors? And what is your secret sauce, your moatability?
I think the key difference is if we view ourselves as a community company that uses real estate to facilitate community. If you talk to the Airbnb folks, they are not, a hotel company. They're a community company, and that's just a fundamental difference. We have today, closing in on 100,000 members. In any given month, about half our members are doing business with one another. If I asked for the show of hands, you've been to a WeWork. There's an energy level. There's a vibrancy. There's a feeling of collaboration that you find in a WeWork that we have frankly invested in design, we've invested in technology, we've invested in a community operating mechanism of sort of how the place runs that is just really, really difficult for anyone to replicate. And the fact that members, if any of you are members, we have our member network. You can do business with other WeWork members around the world. You can visit WeWork locations, around the world when you pop in. And as members said to me, you have the ability, if you're in New York, you can go to London, you can go to Shanghai, you can go to Mexico City, and you can pop into a place that feels like home for you. We're members, at the Hun Club together. You have the ability, and WeWork, that it's sort of this club that you can be in, and you can have that feeling of being in the club, and you have other members who you sort of meet around the world or in the club and you do business with. And there's something, we do business as the club, and being in the club, you know each other, you trust each other, that if no one at the club is ever who you do business with, you're happy to do that business. It's similar at WeWork.
So you mentioned community and this sort of network of people working together. Would you consider WeWork to be a mission-driven company? And if so, are Adam Newman and Miguel McKelvey's personality reflected in that mission?
Yes, absolutely. A mission-driven company, and our mission statement is to create a world where people work to make a life, not just a living. And every employee sort of can, if you ask any WeWork employee on the street, they know that mission statement. And I'm glad you brought up Adam and Miguel's background. So his background. Adam grew up on a kibbutz in Israel. Miguel grew up essentially in a commune in Oregon. So these two individuals who sort of grew up on different sides of the world grew up very much in a community setting. And they have very different personalities and they have very different styles, but the North Star for the two of them has always been the community, and using that community to frankly change the world. We want to fundamentally change how people work and their experience around work, and we fundamentally want to change the experience around living. And those are two pretty sort of lofty goals, but those from day one have sort of been their North Star of we want to change people's lives through making work more meaningful and more communal, and the same with living.
Speaking of Adam, I mean, he hasn't, I guess, coming out of the cable industry into the real estate WeWork, hasn't talked you into growing your hair long like him.
No,
You're not going to do that.
No, it's very funny. Miguel is 6'8", and Adam is 6'5". So. Needless to say, I get a lot of height jokes from them. Not too many hair jokes, but I do get a lot of height jokes from them.
So to build this community and this network, a lot must depend on the dynamic at each location. Do you screen for that in terms of members? Do you target people for that in terms of attracting members?
It's a great question. So it's very interesting, the network's effects in the business. In cities where the brand has really punched through. So if you take New York City today, which has over 30 locations, or London that has over 20 locations, or San Francisco that has over a dozen locations, there's a couple things I would say about WeWork. Not only the buildings in and of themselves, great businesses. You take an average WeWork location with 1,000 members in it, and in the States, it's probably doing $7.5 million of revenue and $2 to $3 million of cash flow. But more importantly, they are great marketing platforms for the business. And when I ask people for their show of hands, what happens is the more buildings we open up in a city, the more CEOs and COOs and CFOs and investors are through them, and realize as a result that WeWork is not a place for just startups. It's a place where, frankly, increasingly we're seeing the largest of the largest companies in the world come to work out of WeWork, whether it's GE or Microsoft or Dell or McKinsey, KPMG. Sort of, every week we're doing deals now with large companies. Well, why are we doing that? One is from a cost per employee perspective, we're 25 to 30% cheaper than any other alternative for people to house their employees. The second is these companies realize they have a real recruiting problem. And what we see, one of the things we track is the amount of time or the amount of mentions WeWork actually gets. You'll see it in recruiting ads now that companies are sort of saying, and we work in the cool WeWork, location, in DC, at a particular building, and so that's something that's very compelling. And they realize that one of the things that really impacts culture is space. And look, the Time Warner Cable, we managed tens of millions of square feet of real estate. We were terrible at it. I mean, we were barely good, at times being a cable company, to actually think we were going to be good running real estate. And real estate, other than people, is the second largest cost often in a company. So, the reason that we're seeing all this interest is because we're cost efficient, we create culture, we create energy, and those are very compelling value propositions. Now what happens is, as you start to get scale in a city, what you will start to see is buildings will evolve depending on where they are in the city. So if you go to the WeWork now at 300 Park Avenue, you're going to see very different folks and very different clientele. You're going to see, frankly, law firms and hedge funds and PE firms. And then if you go to our building in Dumbo, you go more to our 30th Street locations, you're going to see retailers. You go down to Wall Street, you're going to see more trading shops going up. So buildings develop their own personality, and that's very, it's an interesting dynamic. Much like college, like if you got into a dorm that you liked, and the next year, and all your friends were in that dorm, and then the next year you did better in the lottery, and you could go to a better dorm. Teresa and I, when we went to college, we could have left where our roommates lived. It was where our friends are at. And so if we open new buildings with, frankly, have better amenities, better product, generally you can't get people to leave the WeWork they're in because they like having coffee with the same group every day. They do business together. They go out together. And so there's some very interesting sort of social dynamics that come out of the community. And then the other interesting is, as you open more buildings and the community gets stronger in the city, what actually happens is your buildings fill faster and faster in a city. So our speed to fill buildings today in New York, in London, and San Francisco is as high as it's ever been, because the brand is really strong. And frankly, our churn actually comes down in the cities, again, because the brand is strong and the community is getting more and more vibrant.
I hadn't realized that you were selling. I did obviously research about WeWork and everything I could find in the press, but I didn't realize you were selling to or more traditional, non-entrepreneurial firms as well as the
for the longest time, WeWork was the largest member, and we always viewed ourselves, as sort of fellow member in the community. But we've just been passed by both Amazon and HSBC in China, Amazon Boston, and I think it was very interesting to me. We have this building in Boston, Fort Point, that has a basement, and it's not the greatest basement in the world. General Assembly used to run a lot of their classes out of it, and they're moving out because they didn't love the basement. And GE is moving their corporate headquarters. So the guys came in to me the other day and said, we'd like to spend some money to fix up the 4 Point basement. And I said, no, it makes sense. I said, who do you think we can get there? And they said, well, the GE headquarters are taking longer to build, and they already have 100 seats in Boston. They might want to take more. And I said, are you telling me Jeff Immelt's going to work out of the basement of the 4 Point in Boston? But I think you're going to see more and more, much like Amazon Web Services basically said, you know what, you guys don't need to be in the data storage, but let someone else handle this for you. I think the because space has such an impact on culture and it's really expensive and it's hard and you have long-term lease liabilities, if someone else can do that for you, I think that's the reason we're frankly seeing such an uptick in frankly our enterprise offering.
We're talking about managing other people's space. I'd never really kind of focused on that aspect of relieving employers of one of their big headaches, which they're not fundamentally good at. So there's a quote from Steve Roth along those lines on Vornado Realty Trust. He said that the definition of a SMUC is somebody who rents a property at 0.5x and turns around and rents it at 1.5x. That's contrasted with a second quote from The Real Deal that says that WeWork's investors believe the company isn't simply in the leasing business, but rather creating a global community of innovators, which you were saying earlier. They believe this community gives WeWork moat or long-term competitive advantage and will keep it enormously profitable. That, in their minds, justifies a valuation that makes WeWork one of the 10 richest companies in the world. So I guess, do you need a steady supply of entrepreneurs for your inventory? And if that's what you're doing, whether it's entrepreneurs or sort of larger corporates, aren't the barriers to entry low in that event? I mean, can somebody recreate this magic somewhere else?
It's a great question. So a couple of things I would say is, so WeWork has already to date invested, in building out our facilities, in our technology, and our offering has invested over $1 billion. Our landlord partners have invested probably over $2 billion. So look, the economics, basically the way it works is we come into a building, we'll take a 10, 15-year lease on a building. And we then have a build-out cost. So the business has really, from a return on invested capital, our sort of that we have to go out of pocket has changed dramatically because we've driven costs down and landlords have paid more. Why have landlords paid more? Because they have had one case study after another, much like Starbucks came in and Whole Foods came in. If WeWork came into your building, there have been time and time again landlords having outsized returns on that building. And I think it goes back to sort of the ecosystem, comment I made in the beginning, which was, Time Warner Cable made HBO and Turner, worth more money, and who in turn made Time Warner Cable worth more money. And I think people like Steve Roth have, they've embraced that, so to speak. And WeWork is now about 7 years old, but I like to say it's really about 3 years old because for the first 4 years, they had, about 10 buildings. Today we have over 125 buildings. We're in more than, 10 countries and 30 cities. And, we've dramatically scaled the business over the last year, both in the US, internationally. That global footprint has made it really hard for anyone to compete with us on a global scale, has made it really hard for anyone to compete with us, frankly, on global landlord relationships. We can invest more in technology than others can. And this isn't dissimilar from, frankly, the cable industry. The reason Comcast and Time Warner Cable, the two biggest, we couldn't afford to invest in technology that others, frankly, couldn't afford to invest in. You can just amortize it across a larger member base. So I think the nature of the institutional relationships, the nature that landlords know we will fill the buildings and we're good for the rent, that they're willing to write the TI checks because they don't do those types of things for other people. So it is an operationally complex business, and we have really, over the last sort of 18 months, I think, put some real competitive moats around the business.
Let's talk about the return on invested dollar, because you mentioned that it's really a 3-year-old business. I just want to share with everyone here some of these numbers. They're incredible for a company that's just been around for 7 years, but really took off 3 years ago. WeWork's raised $1.7 billion since inception and seen its valuation creep, and this is a 3-year run here you're talking about, from $1.5 billion in 2014 to $10 billion in mid-2015 based on announced deal values, to $16 billion just in October. And now there are reports, and by the way, thank you for coming up here while these reports are swirling around. The reports that the Vision Fund that SoftBank has raised is poised to invest another $2 billion in a deal that values the company at $20 billion. Wow. A lot of people are scratching their heads. I mean, your investors don't view this as a real estate company. I think you've made that pretty clear in what you've said. They must see it the same way. How do they see you, and what's driving their valuations they're giving you?
I think investors look at a couple of things. I think they look at real estate as the largest asset class in the world. No asset class is even close to it in size. So that's one. They look at the sort of evolution of the millennial workplace and the freelancer economy and the amount of startups you're seeing. They look at the geographic trends of people moving more and more to large cities. They look and how that will, drive workplace needs, frankly, living needs. They frankly increasingly look at the fact, because we've had success in our enterprise offering, of what this will mean for companies. They look, because we have a services offering which provide sort of all the business in a box solution for members, not just space, but do you need help with accounting? Do you need help with fundraising? Do you need help with banking? Do you need help with we provide a lot of those services, or have partnerships around a lot of those services. And people say this opportunity is global in nature and the largest asset class, and we are the definitive category leader. No one's even close to where we are. And the math people do is, do I believe these guys will get to 1 million members, 2 million members? And our average member pays us $650 a month across the globe. At 1 million members, we're doing $7.5 billion of revenue and $2.5 billion of EBITDA. And I think people say, yeah, I see that happening over the next several years. That's going to happen, and I see that this business can have 2 million, 3 million members. Will New York City, today, New York City has over 25,000 members. Is it going to be a 150,000 member city? Absolutely. I was in London last week. We'll absolutely have 150,000 members. Mexico City, Shanghai, these are cities that in and of themselves could support the valuation of the company. So I think people sort of look big picture. They'll, and look, investors have obviously been more willing to invest in what they think the business will look like in 2020, 2021, 22. I think that's one of the things we're seeing, which is sort of a, recent phenomenon, and based on our business plans, and we're looking out. I'm very confident. Look, one of the things that's important to me, at AOL, we made investors a lot of money. At Time Warner Cable, we made investors a lot of money. I take it very seriously. Like anyone who's putting money in, I always tell them I will work night and day to make sure we make you money. And I feel confident, when we're taking money at these values, we're going to make these people a lot of money.
Well, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Everyone, give Artie a nice hand.
Thank you.
Coming up here is so busy.